Washington is U.S. State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus. Morgan, it's great to have you back here on the rundown. Let's just start with where this goes next. And not surprisingly, we have heard numerous promises of retaliation from Iran and its proxies. Secretary Pompeo has acknowledged that he expects retaliation. At the same time, though, the secretary says the U.S. is committed to de-escalation. So what specifically is the U.S. doing to de-escalate?
So we have known for at least 2 decades Qasem Soleimani was an indispensable leader in Iran, and he has been wreaking havoc on American allies and interest in the region for over 2 decades. But of course, we really saw events over the last 6 months, and especially the last week, get to a place that was really untenable. You know, for months, we have seen him attack American allies and interest in the region. We saw the downing of an American drone. We saw ships and tankers targeted in the Persian Gulf. We've seen civilian airports in Saudi Arabia attacked. We saw Saudi's oil markets say about 60% of their overall revenue temporarily taken off as it relates to their oil fields. And then, of course, President Trump and especially Secretary Pompeo have been saying since the beginning of this administration. Secretary Pompeo even said this when he was CIA director, that any attack, any attempt to harm American civilians, whether it was by Iranian-backed militias or by the IRGC themselves, that we would make no distinction between the two and that we would hold the regime accountable. So you've seen a lot really snowball and happen over the last week. You saw an American contractor killed. You saw American service members that were injured. You then subsequently saw through Kataib Hezbollah, Iran sponsor attacks directly on the U.S. Embassy. If it wasn't for the United States Marine Corps, we may have seen more Americans harmed or injured, and thankfully that didn't happen in that vicious attack. And then, of course, President Trump had intelligence that showed that Qasem Soleimani would continue these sorts of attacks, and that's why the president made the decision to take the world's biggest and greatest terrorist off the planet.
Morgan, well, I mean, Soleimani has been doing this for 20 years, and we can debate the timing of this and why now, which is another conversation, but I'm more interested right now in what happens next, because of what the U.S. will do, I mean, how this plays out is really going to determine, no less in the future of the Middle East in many ways. So what is the U.S. doing to stop this from escalating even more dramatically?
So we believe a lot of what's next is up to the regime in Iran. President Trump has said unequivocally that he does not want war with Iran, that he wants peace with Iran. We have sought over the past year and a half since we withdrew from the JCPOA to diplomatically and economically isolate Iran. And we have sought to do that because not only were they in violation of a ballistic missile Security Council, UN Security Council resolutions, they also, as I just laid out in a very detailed manner, used these proxies to foment terror in the region. And we were no longer going to allow them to have billions of dollars in revenue to do that. So we have laid out many times in which a path in which the regime in Iran could choose to behave like a normal nation. But since the death of Qasem Soleimani, we have also put the regime on notice that they should not make more unwise decisions. If they make decisions that involve targeting American military members, diplomats, or any of our people in the Middle East or around the world, we will do everything within the law to defend ourselves and to defend American interests.
All right, well, Morgan, because we don't have a lot of time, I want to talk to you about another part of the story, not directly, but still in the picture, which is Israel. We just heard Benjamin Netanyahu coming out of a security cabinet meeting where he said that this is not Israel's issue. We don't want to get dragged into it. But at the same time, the U.S. Embassy in Israel has alerted American citizens of threats. Can Israel stay out of this? And what exactly are those threats that American citizens should be worried about?
Well, we think nobody knows the threat of the Iranian regime, the regime in Iran, more than the country of Israel, more than the people of Israel. There is no country that Iran threatens more on a routine basis through their vile and hateful and racist rhetoric than that of the state of Israel. We're urging not just our American citizens or the people working at our embassies and consulates in Israel, but also around the Middle East to be vigilant, to be on guard. All American citizens that are watching this program in Israel can feel free to go to state.gov, where they can read more about travel warnings and any travel information or security information that the State Department can provide. So unfortunately, the reality is that Americans, because Qasem Soleimani sought attacks that killed an American and injured our service members and sought to attack our embassy, because of all of that active planning, we know that there are threats to America and to Israel. We will work together hand in hand, as we have since the State of Israel's founding, to protect both of our mutual interests.
All right, Morgan Ortagus at the State Department, thanks very much for being with us here on The Rundown.
Thanks for having me.